My parents ruined my life by making my cousin their golden child. Parents kicked me out and me the family's unwanted child. I couldn't believe that I had won a jackpot of 30 million. My heartbeat quickened at that moment, and I quickly told my parents and made the most direct decision to buy them a house and a car so that they could live a better life. I asked them to keep it secret because I knew that wealth brings not only joy, but also endless troubles. My parents agreed readily, but after turning around, they couldn't help but tell my cousin. The next day, my cousin came with a paternity test report and claimed that he was my biological brother. My parents were delighted with his arrival and quickly accepted him. What shocked me even more was that they actually asked me to give him half of the bonus. I refused. This rejection completely changed the relationship between me and my parents. During the argument, my cousin took the opportunity to push me, and I fell heavily down the stairs, hitting my head on the ground and falling unconscious. However, my parents did not hold my cousin responsible. Instead, they chose to forgive him and treat him as their own son. In the end, my parents and cousin squandered my 30 million and enjoyed a luxurious life, while I died alone in the hospital due to a lung infection. But fate seemed to be unfair to me, and I opened my eyes again and returned to that day, the moment I won 30 million. This time, I discovered the unknown secret of my parents. When I saw the familiar numbers in my bank account, I had a clear confirmation in my heart. I was truly reborn. I took a deep breath and decided that this time, I must seize this opportunity. I don't want to die at a young age. The phone rang, breaking my thoughts. William, you said on WeChat that you won the lottery? Is that true? I heard my mother's excited voice on the other end of the phone. Yes, I won 30 million. I gently played with the bank card in my hand, waiting for her reaction. 3 million? Really? My mother's tone was full of doubt. Mom, it's 30 million. I responded coldly, with a hint of sarcasm on my lips. 30 million? My mother was still skeptical. Your cousin said that someone in our city did win 30 million. This sentence instantly reminded me of the time in my previous life when my parents added my cousin to the family group. Really? That's really good luck. I replied calmly, but my eyes were already fixed on the financial management software, and I already had a plan in mind. Well, go home early. There was some disappointment in my mother's voice, and then she hung up the phone. I sat quietly, thinking about the past. In my last life, my tolerance brought betrayal and hurt, but this would never happen again. 30 million. This time I live for myself. I want to live a luxurious life. After hanging up the phone, I already had a plan in mind. I would divide the money into several parts and deposit them into different bank accounts. This was a way out for myself. Since my parents chose to become a family with my cousin, I might as well comply with their wishes. Thinking of the paternity test report from my previous life, I knew how I could help my parents achieve their wish. I didn't waste any time and took a deed to my cousin's rental house. Standing at the door, I took a deep breath, looked around, and felt a little hesitant. Cousin, I called softly. My cousin didn't look up, playing with a gold watch in his hand, and he didn't seem to take me seriously at all. What's wrong? He raised his eyebrows and said casually. Him directly, but whispered, our house may be demolished. When my cousin heard this, he immediately stopped, looked around, and seeing that no one was paying attention, he quickly pulled me into the house. How did you know? He closed the door, a hint of anxiety flashing in his eyes. I took out the plan from my bag and handed it to him. I saw it in the community group. My cousin quickly took the plan, looked at it carefully, and a gleam appeared in his eyes. How will the demolition compensation be divided? She asked. According to the population, each person can get about 60 square meters. I deliberately made my tone vague, but I knew clearly in my heart that my cousin had taken a bait. His eyes grew stronger and stronger, almost making me laugh out loud. What did your parents say? My cousin asked in dissatisfaction. My parents said that they would give them 120 square meters in the future, and I would pay for it and buy a 70 square meter house for myself. I made it up casually, trying to look as if I didn't care. Do you have money to buy it? She obviously didn't believe it. I smiled and responded, I have saved some money in the village in the past few years, about 50,000 or 60,000 yuan, and I was thinking of borrowing some more money from you. My cousin was stunned. You only make 4,000 a month. How can you save 50,000 or 60,000? I smiled foolishly. Usually I eat, drink, and live at home, so I don't spend much money, so I saved so much money. I calmly took out my phone and showed him my Alipay balance. Seeing the expectation in my cousin's eyes, I was secretly proud. He had been completely hooked, and the desire in his eyes seemed as if victory was just around the corner. As I expected, my cousin walked into the house with the paternity test report. I looked at my parents in surprise, pointed at the report on the table, and said with a hint of confusion, "Mom and Dad, what's going on?" I gently threw the report on the table. My expression of pretending to be confused could not hide my inner excitement. My cousin spoke first. His tone was calm, but with a hint of complexity. "William, listen to me." I stared at him, my eyes full of questions, but my heart was eagerly waiting for his explanation. He said slowly, "Back then, your parents suddenly had you. But in order to avoid the family planning policy, they gave me to your aunt for adoption." He took out an adoption certificate and handed it to me. I was slightly stunned, and an indescribable feeling rose in my heart. My cousin was so direct to replace mother with aunt. I suppressed the shock in my heart, picked up the adoption certificate, and looked at it carefully. The clear stamp on it made my heart tremble. "At that time, we thought you were a girl," the mother whispered, holding her cousin's hand, her eyes full of guilt. "So, we gave him to your aunt for adoption. Your cousin has suffered a lot, and we owe him all these years." The father also spoke slowly, his eyes full of apology. "Back then, we thought this was the best choice, but in the end, he suffered so much." My heart was wrenched, and all the emotions surged into my heart. The answer I was expecting seemed to become increasingly vague, with no clear boundaries to trace. "Cousin, is it really just my parents' fault? Or is everything already destined?" The forgotten fragments in my mind suddenly emerged, like a storm, unstoppable. No wonder my parents always pay the rent for my cousin. No wonder they always ask me to deliver meals to my cousin, and even tolerate his repeated mistakes. All the doubts seemed to be answered at this moment. I couldn't help but rush over and hug him tightly. Tears could no longer be suppressed. "Brother, you have suffered." At this moment, all the depression and pain seemed to have found a way to be released. The burden in my heart instantly turned into tears, flowing out with unspeakable guilt. "Mom and Dad, my cousin has been getting all this help because—" I couldn't help but ask the question in my heart, my voice trembling. The parents sighed and finally began to tell the secrets that had been buried by time. My father's business once failed, and the debts he was burdened with left him with no respite. However, the old fortune teller once predicted that I would bring good luck to the family. I felt bitter in my heart, and suddenly understood who was secretly manipulating the chess game of life behind all this. My father's bitter eyes told me that all this was not as simple as I once thought. My cousin seemed to break the silence impatiently. "William, I heard that your house was demolished. Is that true?" There was an indescribable intention in his voice. "How did you know?" My father immediately became alert, as if he was disturbed by this sudden topic. "Dad, I always feel that my brother is also a member of the family and should know these things." I noticed the hidden intention. My mother took over the conversation, her tone relaxed but unnatural. "Yes, William is right." She smiled, but I could feel the uneasiness that she could not conceal. "But I heard that the demolition is distributed based on the number of people." My cousin's words aroused my vigilance. "So I plan to move my household registration back so that we can get more." His eyes flickered, and his thoughts were like a sharp blade, pointing straight at my heart. "The demolition has not been finalized yet." My father seemed a little embarrassed, but the eagerness in my cousin's eyes made it clear to me that he had not given up anything. "But sooner or later, I have to move my household registration back." My cousin suddenly lowered his head, tears in the corners of his eyes, and his voice was full of emotion. "Mom and Dad, I really want to be filial to you." I couldn't help but chime in. "Yes, brother really wants to take care of you." I tried to make my voice sound warm, even a little comforting, but I already had a plan in my mind. "What about your aunt?" My father finally asked the most direct question. "I've already discussed with her, and will give her $3,000 in child support every month. You have to share some of the burden anyway." The expectation in my cousin's tone made me feel a little uneasy. His eyes were fixed on me, as if waiting for my response. I smiled and nodded. "No problem, brother. After all, I grew up in this family, and I should share these responsibilities." I spoke calmly, but secretly pondered my next steps. "Dad, just agree to it." I persuaded him in a low voice with a gentle tone, but I knew in my heart that my father's consent was only the second step of my plan. My father finally agreed to my cousin's request to transfer his household registration, and I successfully achieved my goal of buying a house and a car. In order to avoid my parents' attention, I secretly took the household registration booklet when my father was handling the household registration transfer and made the final preparations. My cousin to buy clothes and accessories to make up for his grievances. At the same time, I took the opportunity to move my things into the new house bit by bit. Every time I put my things in a corner of the new house, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. One night, I was lying in bed, thinking about what I was going to say, and finally I mustered up the courage to say to my cousin, "Brother, I have something to tell you." He didn't look up, but just lowered his head to play with his newly bought Apple phone, and responded nonchalantly, "Go ahead." I already knew what was going on, so I continued. In fact, my family owes more than 1 million yuan. The 240 square meters that will be demolished this time can be divided into two 120 square meter houses. Selling one of them can solve a lot of the debt. My cousin suddenly raised her head. Her expression became nervous in an instant, and there was an unconcealable surprise and anxiety in her eyes. When did this happen? There was anxiety and uneasiness in her voice. Just a few years ago, my father's business failed, and he was in debt. He had to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest every year. I said calmly, but I felt a little uneasy inside. After all, this secret had been hidden for too long. Then why didn't you say it at the beginning? My cousin was obviously a little flustered, and his voice became a little louder. I thought Mom had already told you. I pretended to be shocked, but a sneer flashed in my eyes. It doesn't matter. Once the house is sold, the debt can be settled. My cousin seemed relieved, but I knew that she was still calculating in her mind. At this moment, new news came from the community's WeChat group. Our community will not be demolished. My father's voice was low and heavy. What? Not demolishing it anymore. My cousin's expression suddenly became nervous. It was obvious that this news brought unexpected changes to her plan. Why don't you tear it down? The mother asked anxiously. Because there is a martyr's cemetery on the mountain next door, the government decided that it cannot be demolished. My father explained slowly, his voice filled with helplessness and heaviness. I gently comforted my mother. It's okay, Mom. It's good for our family of four to stay together. However, my cousin suddenly turned around and stormed out of the house angrily. I pretended to be confused and asked, Mom, what happened to my brother? My mother's eyes flickered. She lowered her head, avoiding my sight. It's okay, it's okay. Her tone. I felt that there must be some unknown secret behind it. That night, my cousin did not come home. My aunt called and said he went back to her home. I knew that what happened next was just beginning. I pretended to be sad, went back to my room, and lay on the bed. However, my parents still didn't know the truth and surrounded me to comfort me, completely unable to tell what I was really thinking. The next day, my cousin started packing, obviously planning to leave. Son, what's wrong with you? My mother asked in confusion when she saw her packing. My cousin glanced at me and remained silent. My mother suddenly said to me, William, go out and buy a bottle of soy sauce. She seemed to want me to leave the house. I nodded and pretended to leave, but quietly turned on the recording on my phone and put it on the table. When I came back, my cousin and mother were already sitting in the living room, chatting in a friendly manner. William, I've discussed this with your brother. My mother saw me coming in and immediately said, Our 70 square meter house is no longer big enough for the four of us, so we decided to let you move out. I was stunned. Why? My cousin immediately stood up and said with pretended concern, I think you need your own private space. So I made this decision. There was a hint of hidden pride in his words. I sneered in my heart. Today is Saturday, and everyone in the family is here. Since you were so cruel, don't blame me for being ruthless. I walked out of the room, stood at the door, and said to my mother calmly, Mom, it's okay, I don't need any private space. I knew in my heart that I really wanted to move out, but I could never let you feel that I was being driven out by you. How can a boy not have private space? You will have to have a girlfriend in the future. My mother frowned, revealing a hint of dissatisfaction in her tone. She was holding a bottle of soy sauce in her hand, and suddenly, I was not careful and the bottle fell to the ground with a pop. When the neighbors heard the noise, they opened their doors and stuck their heads out. I took a deep breath and raised my voice to pretend to be calm. Mom, if my brother needs private space, I can live in the living room. Being lively is a natural trait of the Chinese people, and the issue of face is always testing everyone's bottom line. Hey, brother, what are you talking about? My cousin stood up and tried to pull me home. I didn't back off. Instead, I stepped forward, lowered my head, and held back my emotions. Tears suddenly welled up in my eyes. Brother, are you going to chase me away too? This is the home I've lived in for more than 20 years. I pinched myself hard, and tears suddenly welled up in my eyes. As if I was pulled by an irresistible emotion, I could no longer control myself. Brother, what are you talking about? A flash of panic flashed across my cousin's face. He turned his head and winked at my mother, and they both quickly reached out to pull me back. As more and more people gathered around, My heart was like a taut string, and I suddenly realized that I seemed to have become the protagonist of this farce. My feet went weak, and I fell unconsciously. Mom! I looked at my mother in shock, my voice trembling. Brother, is it the same for you? I asked, tears dripping onto the floor, although I tried my best to hold back. But the pain in my heart was unbearable. You fell down by yourself. How can you blame us? My mother came over in a panic, her expression full of panic and helplessness. I used all my strength to stand up, dusted myself off, and said calmly, I understand. William, you fell by yourself. How can you blame us? My mother walked up to me. Before she finished speaking, I subconsciously took a few steps back and held on to the railing of the stairs tightly. Yeah, I almost fell down the stairs. I whispered back, my tone weak, but with a chill that was hard to conceal. You. My mother wanted to say something, but I interrupted her immediately. Mom, I'll go. As soon as I finished speaking, I turned into the room and picked up the phone that I had recorded before. At this time, Aunt Lee's voice came from downstairs. She asked with concern, what's going on in your family? It's okay, Aunt. I wiped my tears and try not to look so fragile. How can these parents be like this? The neighbors' discussions became more and more loud, and the harsh voices made me feel cold. How could these uncles and aunts, who had watched me grow up, stand on my cousin's side and accuse me? I couldn't believe that my cousin actually expected these people to stand on his side. I walked out of the house with a smile, listening to the chatter coming from upstairs, hailed a DD car, and drove away. Although I left a little earlier than originally planned, before I left, I made sure they would not feel at ease. I couldn't let them feel at ease so easily. When I got back to my house, I finally breathed a sigh of relief, lay comfortably on the sofa, picked up my phone, and checked the time. The takeaway would be delivered soon. Ding, ding, dong, ding, ding, dong. The phone rang, and I picked up the phone, thinking that the delivery man must have arrived. Hello, hello. I picked up the phone and prepared to confirm with the delivery man. Hello, brother. I heard a familiar voice on the other end of the line, and my heart sank. It was my cousin. I immediately took off the mask on my face and sat up in panic. This community is a high-end community. Unless the owner agrees, outsiders cannot easily enter. Logically speaking, my cousin and his friends had no idea that I lived here. So what was the meaning of this phone call? Full of doubts, I patiently waited for her next words. Did you win the 30 million jackpot? There was a hint of pride and provocation in my cousin's voice, without any hesitation. Brother, what are you talking about? I pretended not to understand, but I was already alert in my heart. So far, no one except me knows that I won this big prize. Because of the lessons learned in my previous life, I will not easily trust anyone in this life, especially my cousin. Take a look at the picture I sent you on WeChat. My cousin's tone was full of affirmation and confidence, as if he already knew the truth. I could sense her confidence and felt uneasy, but at the moment I could only continue to play dumb. What picture? I opened WeChat, and the photo of me receiving the award popped up on the screen. In the photo, I was wearing a mask, a hat, and a men's jacket. The photo was taken from a far angle, and it was obvious that the photographer tried his best to avoid being recognized. Brother, is there anything wrong with this picture? I still pretended to be innocent, with a hint of doubt in my tone. That person must be you. My cousin's voice was full of pride and expectation, as if he was sure that I would confess. Brother, if that person was really me, I would have told you a long time ago. How could I be kicked out of the house by you? I pretended to be wronged and said, tears quietly falling. Why? You turned against me. My cousin's tone became cold, with a hint of provocation and dissatisfaction. I knew that if I agreed to their request, I would become their pawn, a tool to control my fate. How could I be so stupid? No, I couldn't be fooled by them so easily. Brother, you... I opened my mouth to speak, but found that my words were stuck in my throat. In the end, I hung up the phone cruelly, although I had already prepared myself in my heart, knowing that sooner or later, all this would explode. But when this moment really came, I was unprepared, and my heart was still filled with unspeakable confusion and anger. Ding dong, ding dong. The phone rang again, mercilessly, instantly breaking my defenses. I couldn't help it, and angrily threw it away. The feeling of powerlessness from the past surged into my heart like a tide. The feeling of being isolated and helpless began to invade me again. But I couldn't let myself fall into this abyss again. Absolutely not. I had to stay calm and stay rational. Taking a deep breath, I bent down and picked up my phone. The cracked screen reflected a blurry light in the sunlight, as if a corner of my heart was also broken. At this moment, I clearly realized that I had to act quickly to disperse all my information and ensure that they would not control me. I did not hesitate to change my cell phone and phone card so that at least for a short period of time, my cousin and parents might not be able to find me. Then I contacted the largest real estate agency in the city and quickly purchased several properties. A cunning rabbit has 3 burrows. I had to do all this. Only in this way could I protect myself and avoid being caught by them. The money was almost used up, and I kept the remaining 200,000 for backup, and the rest of the money was handed over to the financial planner for management. It was simple and clear, except for the 200,000, no one could touch the other funds unless I signed in person. These preparations are to cope with any possible changes. To ensure that nothing could go wrong, I asked a lawyer to draft a will to ensure that everything was legally protected. After all the arrangements were made, I took 3 days off and went home to lie quietly, thinking over and over again whether there was anything I had missed. Oh, and there's also that recording. Maybe it contains a truth that I don't know yet. I picked up my phone, clicked play, and the recording that I had heard countless times sounded again. "Son, what's wrong with you?" came the mother's gentle voice. "Mom, I've had enough. For people have to live in a 70 square meter house. I'm going to rent a house." The sound of my cousin throwing things was mixed in. "Don't be anxious, son." The mother comforted him anxiously. "Why aren't you anxious? He is an adopted child. Why should he live with me?" My cousin's words were angry and sharp, and the harsh voice pierced my heart. An adopted child? I couldn't believe what I heard. It was as if time had frozen and the world had stopped. This couldn't be possible. How could I be their adopted child? They had raised me for so many years. How could it be possible? No, this couldn't be true. Calm down, calm down. I forced myself to calm down and told myself that all speculations require evidence, not emotions. Cold sweat gradually seeped out of my back, and a chill rose from the soles of my feet, as if warning me that I might be facing a reality from which there was no escape. "Be gentle." Mother's voice came again, followed by the sound of the door closing. "She hasn't gone far." My cousin's low voice sounded. "Mom, my dad is dead, and you're all I have left. If you don't care about me, who will?" My cousin's words shocked me all over, as if I was struck by lightning. "Isn't Dad still alive?" What did my cousin mean? Could it be? I know, son." The mother's voice was still soft. "Son, what we have to do now is to drive William away." These words were like a sharp knife, stabbing directly into my chest. Calm down, calm down." I forced myself to continue listening, even though every word stabbed my heart like a knife. The noise in the recording became clearer and clearer until I heard a vague voice. "Son, it's all yours. Mom will help you." At that moment, my hand loosened, the phone fell to the ground, and the world seemed to collapse in an instant. It turned out that everything I knew might just be a carefully woven lie, a carefully planned scam. Calm down, William. You can't let these emotions take over you. You have to stay sober and hold on to your reason." I gritted my teeth, struggled to stand up from the bed, rushed into the bathroom, and washed my face with cold water. There seemed to be thousands of voices intertwined in my mind, so chaotic that I could hardly breathe. My father's death, the conversation between my mother and my cousin, those words about the adopted child, everything was churning through my mind. Am I not my parents' biological child at all? If not, where are my biological parents? Who is this dead father that my cousin mentioned? What's the connection between him and me? All the questions were like a bottomless whirlpool, swallowing me up. Confusion and fear were entangled together, and there was no escape. I took out a piece of paper and a pen and listed all the questions in my mind one by one. Am I really my parents' biological son? If not, where are my biological parents? Who is the dead father my cousin mentioned? What is his relationship with my parents? What exactly is the thing that the mother got for her cousin? These questions became the truths that I was most eager to find out at the moment. I had no time to think about anything else and had to find the answers to these questions as soon as possible. The next day, I contacted several private detective agencies without hesitation and asked them to help me find out the 3 things. Money was not a problem. I just needed the truth to come to light. However, before I could take action, my boss called me. "Hey, William, where are you? Your brother and your mother are here at work looking for you." I was silent for a while, feeling powerless, and then I replied, "Boss, I'm with my friends. Please tell them that I'll be home in the evening." After hanging up the phone, I sat in the car, looking coldly at the upstairs window, and couldn't help but let out a bitter smile. My mood was so complicated, and everything in front of me seemed like a joke. My mother and cousin have already gone to work, and I know they will come to me soon to ask about the 30 million. And I hold all the truth in my hands. Since they want to ask, let me tell them. These words and money are all in my hands, and they can only believe whatever I say. That night, I walked into the house with a basket of fruit. I knew that there would be no happy dinner time tonight, but I still couldn't help but buy my favorite fruit. Maybe I still need a little comfort tonight. William is back. My cousin greeted me warmly as always. I saw them sitting together, talking and laughing, and the intimacy made me feel a little uncomfortable. It was as if they had always been a complete family, and I was just an outsider. I nodded slightly and sat down at the table silently. My cousin still greeted me gently. William, don't just stand there. Sit down and rest for a while. I know very well that this house has never belonged to me. I picked up a banana silently and ate it slowly. Only when I was full did I have the energy to face all the conversations that followed. Soon, my cousin came up to me with a few photos in his hand. He looked at me with a firm gaze. William, is this you? He pointed at the man in the coat in the photo. My heart tightened, but I pretended to be ignorant on the surface. Brother, what are you talking about? My cousin continued to point at the photo and said calmly, this is obviously a man. I tried to change the subject. Have you seen this watch? He picked up another photo, and the watch in the photo made my heart skip a beat. That watch was chosen by my parents and cousin as a gift for my 18th birthday. I have been wearing it since I was 18, and I still wear it today. Suddenly, I felt a little ironic. Those who knew me well could recognize me through a watch, but I stood downstairs for a whole afternoon, and no one recognized me. So, William, did you really win 30 million? The mother asked impatiently, her eyes full of anticipation. I took a deep breath and nodded, but my heart felt empty. What about the money? My father continued to ask with doubt in his eyes. I looked up at them and felt a heavy pressure. Facing my parents, I suddenly felt that every word I said was like walking on the edge of a knife, heavy and cautious. In order to withdraw the money as soon as possible, I donated 5 million first. I said calmly, are you crazy? My cousin suddenly stood up and screamed, his eyes full of anger. I ignored his reaction and continued. The donation could be partially deducted from my taxes, and I ended up with 24 million. There was a flash of disappointment in the mother's eyes, but she still asked, what about the remaining money? I was silent for a moment, then said, I've thought about it. I'll leave all the money to you. As soon as the words came out of my mouth, I saw the smiles on my parents' faces that they couldn't hide for a moment. However, I continued, but I asked my lawyer, and he said that after you die, the money will still belong to me. So I divided the money into several parts. William, you are crazy. My cousin pointed at me angrily and shouted, even if mom and dad are gone, this money doesn't belong to you. I looked at him coldly. It's not your turn. I took out 5 million and set up a medical fund just for you. At least you don't have to worry about money when you are sick. I looked at my father with a complex mix of emotions in my heart, and my eyes finally softened a little. My father nodded, a look of satisfaction on his face. William, this is a good arrangement. However, my cousin's sneer did not disappear. Huh. Do you need so much money to see a doctor? I turned around, feeling mixed emotions, but still said calmly, I will manage the remaining money for you. You will get 200,000 yuan every month and 1 million yuan at the end of the year. This will last for 15 years. The whole room fell into silence, and the atmosphere seemed to be frozen. As soon as I said that, my cousin's reaction was faster than I expected. He suddenly stood up with a light in his eyes that I couldn't describe, as if he wanted to tear something out of me. You mean mom and dad can make 3 million every year? Her voice was filled with shock and disbelief. I nodded, feeling a little nervous. The anxiety almost made me breathless. Dad, Mom, I gave you the money. I know you're soft-hearted and may lend it out. That's why I made this decision. I forced myself to calm down, squeezed my thighs, and reminded myself to stay calm. I lowered my head and whispered in a voice so low that it was almost inaudible, Dad, Mom, you won't blame me, right? Tears slid down unconsciously. I quickly wiped them with a tissue. Knowing in my heart that all this was just a play, I had to play. My cousin's voice sounded again, with a hint of temptation. What about you? Where do you live? Aren't you going to use all this money to buy a house? Her question hit the nail on the head. I did buy a house, but I wouldn't tell her. I could only force a smile and say, Dad, Mom, I've received part of the money I borrowed earlier, and I used 10,000 yuan to rent a house. I avoided their gazes, but in my heart, I was looking forward to their reactions. My mother stood up, patted my shoulder gently, her tone gentle but slightly tired. It's okay, leave the rest to me. Her tone touched my heart, and I instantly felt a sense of warmth and a hint of helplessness. I didn't say anything else, but directly transferred the remaining 90,000 yuan to them. At that moment, the emotions surging in my heart were too complicated to express in words. I wanted to end it all as soon as possible, but I couldn't bear to give it up completely. My father picked up his phone and looked at the balance in his Alipay account. His smile widened, and the smile lines at the corners of his eyes deepened, as if those millions were just an ordinary income for him, easy and natural. After dinner, I offered to wash the dishes, picked up all the dishes, and put them quietly into the garbage bag I had prepared in advance. Dad, Mom, I'm leaving first. I'll take the garbage with me. I turned around and prepared to leave. But when I looked back, my parents and cousin were still sitting on the sofa, motionless, and no one looked up at me. I quietly pushed open the door, and an indescribable feeling of loneliness surged in my heart. I walked outside quickly without stopping and went straight to the private hospital. At that moment, my heart had almost no hesitation and my steps were firm. The result of the paternity test seemed to be the only answer to all my questions. I sat awake all night in the hospital waiting room, with so many emotions surging in my heart. Time seemed to pass very slowly, and every minute was filled with a heavy sense of oppression. Finally, the nurse handed me the report, and my hands were shaking slightly. Looking at the words on it, I could hardly believe my eyes. I was really an adopted child. At that moment, my world seemed to collapse. I used to think that no matter what, I would eventually provide some comfort for their aging and bring warmth to their later years. But now, I understand that I never belonged to this family. Suddenly, I understood why I forgave my cousins so easily. Could it be that deep down in my heart, did you ever expect to find a sense of belonging? But now, all this seems ridiculous and ironic. All my tolerance and compromise were just for an unreal fantasy. I opened the paternity test report of my cousin and my mother, and my hand stopped at that page involuntarily, and I was stunned. The report of my cousin showed that she and my mother were indeed related by blood. But I suddenly realized that the report my cousin had been holding was not a paternity test between him and me, but between her and my mother. I should have seen all this clearly earlier. But now, none of this matters anymore. Since I have no blood relationship with them, why should I continue to fantasize about it? I decided to completely cut off all contact with them and put an end to everything. I handed in my resignation without hesitation. I no longer needed this job. Since I already had money, there was no reason for them to find me again. I made up my mind to do this thoroughly and give myself and them a clear ending. However, just as I was about to pack up and leave, the phone suddenly rang. Hello, William. Come to the hospital quickly. Your father is in the ICU. On the other end of the phone, the mother's voice was hurried and flustered. What's going on? I almost jumped up from my chair, my heart beating faster instantly. William, your father has a cerebral hemorrhage. There was an unconcealable cry in the mother's voice, as if even breathing had become difficult. How could it be a cerebral hemorrhage? Doesn't he still have another month before he needs to change the dressing? A bold idea flashed through my mind, but my mother's heart-wrenching cry made me immediately put that idea behind me. Mom, don't worry. Tell me which hospital it is, and I'll be there right away. I quickly put on my clothes, picked up the car keys, and rushed out the door. When I arrived at the hospital, I saw my cousin standing in the corridor, talking on the phone and waiting anxiously. The doctor stood next to my mother, seeming to persuade her sign. Mom, what's going on? I walked over quickly, stood beside my mother, and asked anxiously. Help, doctor, save him. We must save him no matter what. The mother held the doctor's hand tightly, tears flowing uncontrollably. The doctor kept persuading her. Auntie, just sign and you can use the ventilator right away. Why? Can't you give him a ventilator first and then let us sign? My cousin's voice was harsh and full of impatience. I looked at the pen held tightly by my mother, and an irrepressible emotion suddenly surged in my heart. I snatched the pen from my cousin without hesitation and resolutely signed my name on it. Who are you to the patient? The doctor looked at me, frowning slightly. I am his son. I answered, my voice firm and unwavering. Who said you're the son? I am. The cousin immediately sneered with disdain. Before she finished speaking, she tore up the notice in the doctor's hand. At this moment, the nurse shouted hurriedly, Dr. Liu, the patient has ventricular fibrillation. The doctor immediately took out a new notice and handed it to me anxiously. Sign it quickly. You can save him. The doctor said almost pleadingly. Why should I sign? He can be saved even if I don't sign. The cousin still refused to let go. She continued to argue with the doctor, seemingly unwilling to see anyone take action. I ignored him quickly snatched the pen from her hand and signed my name again. Humph. Signing the contract doesn't necessarily mean you can be saved. My cousin sneered, his face full of provocation. The doctor looked at me, then at my cousin, with a hint of helplessness and confusion in his eyes, but he said nothing, just turned around and rushed to the ward. Looking at my cousin's face, full of disdain, I suddenly felt a surge of anger erupting like a volcano. I slapped him hard, and almost all the repression and anger burst out at this moment. Her cheek. That was what I had always wanted to do, and today I finally did it. I felt an indescribable joy in my heart. Who are you? How dare you stand here and give orders? I glared at her coldly, my voice filled with uncontrollable anger. My cousin was stunned. His eyes widened and his face was full of disbelief. Son, the mother hurriedly supported her, her eyes full of heartache and helplessness. You dare to hit me? My cousin glared at me, with a fire flickering in his eyes. What's wrong with hitting you? Dad's life or death is in danger now. Why are you yelling here? I sneered and spoke bluntly, my tone even sharper than before. I quickly handed the notice to the nurse, standing at the door of the emergency room. Excuse me, nurse. William, I'm going to fight you. My cousin stood up and roared, raising his hand to hit me. Without hesitation, I kicked my cousin, pushed her to the ground, and then quickly sat on her, pressing her shoulders hard. You want to hit me? Then get under me first. My hand rose unconsciously and slapped her hard in the face. Even though I nearly crushed her to dust, hospital security finally separated us. My heart was racing, anxiety boiling in my chest. I stood outside the emergency room, anxiously waiting for the result of my father's rescue. But at this moment, my cousin curled up in his mother's arms, crying like a helpless child. I walked over and kicked her coldly. Why are you crying? Your father has already been admitted to the emergency room. Have you ever seen yourself so sad? Did you deliberately let him go to the emergency room? My cousin suddenly stopped crying, with a look of shock on her face. I stared at her, and a chill suddenly surged through my heart. Could it be that what I said was true? Could she be related to my father's illness? Who said that? How could I let Dad go to the emergency room? My cousin explained in panic, with obvious unnaturalness in his voice. Her reaction made me more suspicious. At this moment, the doctor finally came out of the emergency room. Doctor, what's going on? I hurried forward, my tone full of anxiety. The doctor shook his head gently, his tone calm but full of helplessness. We have done our best. Let's arrange the funeral. My mother suddenly burst into tears, and I couldn't help but feel tears welling up in my eyes. At that moment, it felt like the whole world was collapsing. I lowered my head and bowed deeply to the doctor. Thank you, doctor. The doctor helped me up and sighed. Girl, keep some distance from your cousin. I followed the doctor's line of sight and saw a hint of a smile on my cousin's face, which made me feel cold inside. The smile was fleeting, but it seemed to hide a secret. Mom, have you brought Dad's high blood pressure medicine? I supported my mother and spoke in a deep voice. Yes. Mother nodded and was about to take it out of her arms, but was suddenly slapped open by my cousin. The person is dead. Where can I get the high blood pressure medicine? My cousin's eyes wandered around, looking extremely uneasy. I whispered, the doctor said that if you haven't finished taking the medicine, you can return it. I picked up the medicine bottle on the ground and handed it to the doctor without hesitation. The doctor opened the bottle and took a look, frowning slightly. This is vitamin C. My heart skipped a beat, and I quickly snatched the bottle of medicine from the doctor. Vitamin C is yellowish, and captopril is white. The doctor continued to explain, has your father taken his high blood pressure medicine on time recently? I was stunned, and suddenly remembered the days when I was kicked out of home. I hadn't seen my father for more than a month. Doctor, if my father hasn't taken his high blood pressure medicine for more than a month, will this cause cerebral hemorrhage? My voice trembled a little, and I almost tried to hold back the panic in my heart. The doctor was silent for a while, and finally said, in theory, if you don't take the medicine on time and your emotions fluctuate too much, it is possible to cause cerebral hemorrhage. I took a deep breath and then asked, what if both conditions are met? The doctor's eyes were serious, and his voice was low. Then the possibility of cerebral hemorrhage is much greater. Thank you, doctor. I lowered my head, clutched the bottle of medicine tightly, and walked out of the office with heavy steps. My mind was in turmoil, and I held the bottle tightly with both hands, as if it was the only thing that could keep me calm. I don't know how I walked out of the doctor's office. My steps were heavy, my heart felt like it was being pressed down by a huge rock, and it was difficult to breathe. The sun was still blazing outside the window, and the cicadas were chirping in my ears. The harsh sound made me feel more oppressive. I lowered my head and walked towards my mother, who was standing there, her eyes full of expectation and anxiety. "How is it, William? How much money was refunded?" Her voice was trembling a little, as if she was asking a riddle waiting for an answer. At this moment, I looked at my mother, but I felt an endless sense of strangeness in my heart. I could no longer determine her role in this vortex, and even my cousin confused me. But one thing I knew was that I had to keep all the evidence. The doctor said that there are only 2 or 3 pills left, and they cannot be refunded. I said as calmly as possible, with a hint of helplessness in my voice, but it could not be refuted. The next day, we hastily held my father's funeral. Relatives came one after another, but the sad atmosphere did not wake me up from this nightmare. Everything in front of me seemed like a vague dream, far away, and I couldn't see the truth clearly. "William, Dad is gone. What about the 5 million?" My cousin came to me right after the funeral. The eagerness and anxiety in his eyes made me feel annoyed. I lowered my head to sort through my father's belongings and said in a cold but firm voice, "I told you, the money is for Mom and Dad. I've asked a lawyer, and we both have inheritance rights." My cousin did not give up. He stood in front of me with an uncompromising tone. I looked up at him impatiently and responded coldly. It was Mom who inherited it. I knew that I had to confront my cousin and not let him get the upper hand. I held a bottle of vitamin C in my hand, but my heart was empty. How did my father die? There was still no answer. But I know that the secrets hidden behind my cousin will be exposed one day. Now, the only thing I can do is to let my mother and cousin fight each other and buy more time for myself. As for who my cousin's father was, this question was no longer important. All the questions, gradually, I began to realize seemed to no longer be the key. The most important thing was still the death of my father, and what was the truth behind it. I have submitted all relevant information to the police, and they told me that my father has been cremated and the chances of uncovering the truth are slim. But I decided to give it a try. Meanwhile, the private investigator also provided me with some clues. "Cousin, the competition between you and me has just begun. Can the money be withdrawn?" My cousin still didn't give up and looked anxious. "No, that's the medical fund, unless both parents are gone." I responded coldly. His persistence made me upset, and my face didn't fluctuate at all. In fact, I didn't know how to withdraw the medical fund. I just never intended to let the money really go into my mother's hands. Initially, my idea was just to use the money to protect my parents in their later years. What if Mom wants to take it out? Can she take it out? I was getting more and more annoyed by my cousin's questioning. "No," I answered bluntly, my tone full of impatience. "Brother, can you ask less questions? You have so much free time, why not spend some time with Mom?" As soon as I finished speaking, my cousin finally realized that he shouldn't ask any more questions and turned away tactfully. I left my mother and cousin at home and secretly took my father's belongings to the police station. Then I went to the private detective and saw their investigation report. Everything was as I expected. My mother had a secret past when she was young. She got pregnant with my cousin, and my father became the one who took over without any regrets. In order to keep it secret, my mother gave birth to me again and tried to cover up everything. But my birth was not a lucky one. I was stillborn. My mother found me, and the rest is what I know. In order to avoid my father's continued suspicion, my mother sent my cousin away. I have no idea what happened afterwards. However, at the door of the emergency room, my cousin's words revealed some of the truth. Despite knowing all this, my parents raised me for more than 20 years. If my mother really had no involvement in the incident, I would still be willing to provide for her in her old age. After all, she was the mother who raised me for more than 20 years, and I cannot easily forget this. When I got home, I saw my cousin snuggling up to my mother. He was smiling warmly, and his eyes were full of happiness. My cousin seemed to have made her very happy, and my mother's carefree look made me feel a little heavy. I whispered, "Mom, I'm back." My voice broke this warm scene. "Oh, my brother is back." My cousin immediately stood up, looked at me with a smile on his face and a proud look in his eyes. I just nodded slightly and gave her a faint smile without saying anything extra. Our relationship is no longer as close as it used to be. "William, Mom wants to sell this house." The mother suddenly spoke with a hint of hesitation in her voice. She clasped her hands together, looking a little uneasy. "Why?" I looked at my mother in amazement, feeling inexplicably flustered. After all, this house was the result of my parents' hard work throughout their lives. It was their home. How could my mother just sell it so easily? The mother's eyes darkened and her voice became low. I've thought about it for a long time, and I really don't want to stay here anymore. Every time I see these things, I recall too many past events. She raised her hand and wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes. I didn't say anything else, just whispered, "Okay. Then I'll find an agent tomorrow and put the house up for sale." My cousin's tone suddenly became excited, with an eagerness that was hard to conceal. I couldn't help but frown, wondering so fast. My eyes subconsciously turned to my mother, and a vague sense of uneasiness arose in my heart. The mother nodded, with sadness in her eyes and her lips trembling slightly. "I really want to leave this place as soon as possible and stay away from those painful memories. Where do you plan to live in the future?" I couldn't help but ask again, feeling something was wrong in my heart. My cousin paused, looked at my mother, and turned to me. "Brother, isn't the house you rented very good? Look, it's only 10,000 yuan a year, which is completely enough to live in." The tone of his voice seemed as if this matter was the simplest thing for him. This made me feel cold. I no longer had any trust in my cousin or even my mother. Every word they said sounded full of calculation and scheming. Of course, the mother's attitude suddenly became firm, as if she had made up her mind and stated her position without hesitation. I was filled with irritation, but I forced myself to stay calm and said expressionlessly, "Okay, I'll pack it up and you guys can move in the day after tomorrow." I knew that the house would be sold sooner or later. My cousin and mother's plan only made everything more complicated. I had already made up my mind. My cousin is a trouble after all, and my mother, the mother I once relied on and trusted, is no longer the one I remember. I walked into the kitchen, quickly picked up my phone, and sent a message to the real estate agent. Money can solve many problems. Even ghosts can be dragged away. Soon, the agent replied to me and found a basement for me. "Cousin, since you must live in my house, just live there as long as you want." I thought to myself. Not long after, I asked someone to simply decorate the basement. The bed sheets were the cheapest ones in the wholesale market, and a short-sleeve shirt worth more than 10 yuan from Taobao was hung in the corner. After finishing the arrangement, I sat down and waited quietly for their arrival. When my mother and cousin came in with their luggage and saw everything I had prepared for them, they immediately chose the five-star hotel without hesitation. "William, you won 30 million. Why are you still living in the basement?" My cousin was sitting in a luxurious presidential suite, drinking soda and complaining about me. While helping my mother pack her things, I answered her, "I left all the money to my parents." My cousin sighed, his tone somewhat disdainful. "You are so stupid that you don't even plan to prepare yourself properly." I responded casually, "My parents' things are my things." "How do you know that your parents' things are yours?" My cousin smiled coldly and stared at me. "Of course, some of it belongs to you, brother." I try to please her and try my best to stop him from talking about topics that made me unhappy. My cousin just smiled and turned away, ignoring me. But I felt a little uneasy, as if something was wrong. However, just when I thought everything would calm down, the hospital called. "Hello, are you Ms. Linda's family member?" "Ms. Linda is in the People's Hospital for emergency treatment." An urgent voice came from the other end of the phone. "My mother is being rescued." I was stunned. My voice trembled for a moment. I confirmed again. "Rescue?" "Yes." The other party answered affirmatively. "Okay, I'll be there right away." After hanging up the phone, I got up without hesitation and drove to the hospital. When I arrived at the hospital, the staff told me that my mother's life could not be saved. "What's going on?" I questioned the uniformed hotel staff angrily, my heart filled with anger, feeling that something wrong was quietly approaching. When our cleaners entered the room, they found your mother lying on the floor. The hotel manager replied calmly. "What about my cousin, the woman who lives with my mother?" My voice couldn't help but become heavier. An inexplicable anxiety began to spread in my heart. "She went out this morning and hasn't come back yet. Before she left, she told us that she would clean up at noon." The manager's tone remained calm, as if this was just an ordinary incident. "Cleaning at noon?" I repeated this sentence, and a sense of doubt rose in my heart. What exactly is my cousin planning? What is the relationship between her and my mother? Did the hotel seal off the room? Did they call the police? I said anxiously, thinking of my father's case. The police said at the time that there was no body and the case had not progressed. What was my cousin up to now? "William, don't worry. We called the police immediately." The hotel manager's answer was still calm. Soon after, the police came to the hospital to take my statement. I sat helplessly in the lobby, waiting for the next investigation. My cousin was also taken away for questioning. She said that her mother asked her to clean the room at noon, but she went to do some work. Just as I was about to ask more questions, my phone suddenly vibrated. It was a message from the hotel. I opened my phone and saw a series of photos. In the photos, my mother was lying on the ground with several bottles of red wine and soda scattered around her, and the trash can was filled with milk tea packaging bags. These things were clearly prohibited by the doctor after my mother was diagnosed with diabetes. I buy 1 or 2 bottles of milk tea for my mother every month to satisfy her cravings. But who buys so many? The answer is obvious. I went to the police and asked for an autopsy, feeling anxious and worried. William, I'm sorry, you are not qualified to request an autopsy. The policeman's words hit my heart like a heavy hammer, and deep despair swept over me. What do you mean? I couldn't help but ask back, my voice trembling. An autopsy must have the consent of the next of kin, and you don't. The police replied calmly, without a trace of fluctuation in his eyes. Am I not your parents' son? Why doesn't it count? I asked anxiously, feeling an uncontrollable anxiety. But your name is not on the household registration. The police handed me a document, his voice calm, as usual. I looked down and felt dizzy. My mother and cousin's names were clearly listed in the household registration book, but the column for my father only said death. How is this possible? I felt as if my body was drained of energy and cold sweat soaked my back. I had never moved my household registration, and my ID card was still in my hand, so why was this happening? The police's indifferent attitude made me feel like my whole world had collapsed in an instant. I was erased from my parents' names, and even the traces of my existence were erased. I took out my ID card from my bag, my heart beating faster, and tried to stay calm. Please help me check again. I handed it to the policeman, my tone firm but calm. The policeman took the ID card, looked at me, and said calmly, "Sorry, your ID card has been reported lost." Report a loss? My mind went blank, and my chest felt like it was being pressed down by something heavy. I forced myself to calm down. William, don't panic. There must be something I overlooked. I took a deep breath and unconsciously glanced at my cousin who was taking notes next to me. What did he do in the morning? A bold idea suddenly came to my mind, and I almost couldn't help but raise my voice. Officer, I have a clue. I stared at my cousin, and my mind quickly sorted out every detail, piecing together all possible truths. I suspect that the deceased son may be involved in the murder. I paused, spoke in a deep voice, and began to tell everything I knew, including the doubts about the money. In summary, the son of the deceased had a reasonable motive to kill the deceased and fake it as an accident. The policeman was silent for a moment, looked down at the transcript, and said calmly, "William, if what you said is true, then this will no longer be a civil case, but a criminal case." He handed me the transcript and said, "Please confirm if there is anything untrue. If yes, please sign it." I lowered my head and quickly signed my name. Cousin, since I can't confront you directly, let external forces reveal all this. William, please do not leave the city until the case is solved. The police put away the documents and gave a final reminder. I nodded, feeling a little complicated, but at least I had taken a crucial step. In the next few days, I first went to reissue my ID card and check the report of loss. Sure enough, the time of reporting the loss was almost the same as the day my mother had the accident. Then, I went to the agency to find out about the sale of the house. The result shocked me. The day after my mother's accident, the house had been sold and all the money was transferred to my cousin's account. Sure enough, there must be something wrong when things are out of the ordinary. I couldn't help but sneer. Cousin, it seems that you didn't expect this day to come, did you? A few minutes later, my cousin called me in a sarcastic tone. William, did you know that the community is going to be demolished? I smiled and replied calmly, Cousin, I told you at the beginning that the community is going to be demolished. I pretended to be relaxed, without any fluctuation in my tone. Oh, really? You become more capable. The cousin on the other end of the phone sounded like he was gritting his teeth, and his anger was almost bursting out. I smiled, feeling happy. My cousin's anger had no effect on me. Cousin, you are too kind. Oh, I forgot. You graduated from high school, so you don't understand the sentence. On the other end of the phone, my cousin's anger was almost uncontrollable, and I could imagine his ferocious face. William, I'm going to your basement to settle accounts with you now. Okay. I picked the rhinestones on my nails leisurely with a relaxed tone. After hanging up the phone, I couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. My household registration has been transferred to this house, and my ID card is in my hand. No matter how much trouble my cousin made, we could just let him go. However, not long after, the police called. Hello, William. Your brother Michael is being interrogated at the Chinois Road Public Security Bureau on suspicion of illegal intrusion. I responded calmly, I don't know him, officer, you may be wrong, I don't have a brother. After that, I hung up the phone without hesitation. These days, life finally calmed down. I felt like I could breathe more easily, and even drinking water seemed particularly relaxing. However, the good times didn't last long. A few days later, my cousin called me again. William, where did you put your parents' medical fund? His tone was impatient and obviously a little anxious. I was a little surprised that my cousin was released so quickly. It seems that I underestimated his means. What medical fund? How should I know? I answered slowly while strolling around the mall. William, you're a liar. You've learned to lie at such a young age. My cousin's tone on the other end of the phone was full of anger, and I couldn't help but laugh. A few days later, when I saw my cousin again, he showed up at the police station. This time he had illegally entered my home, and his target was my house. William, do you want to hold him accountable? The police handed me a video shot by the community security guard. In the video, my cousin looked arrogant and said to the security guard, "This is my brother's house," and threatened him not to stop me. I didn't watch the entire video. I just put on my sunglasses silently and whispered, "I don't know him. You can handle it however you want. I will cooperate. The lawyer will take over the follow-up matters." Cousin, now you finally got what you wanted, right? According to the procedure, my cousin was quickly put back into the detention center. At this moment, I just hope that the police investigation can make some progress as soon as possible. After all, my cousin already has my address. I understand that my cousin has started to take action. Although I have been vigilant, there will always be omissions. Now that he knows where I live, it is time to move to another place. This time, I chose not to buy a house, but to live in a hotel. Although the hotel is not completely safe, at least I can change places at any time. I chose this 3 boroughs method, and my cousin probably didn't expect me to do this. The lawyer told me that my cousin would have to stay in the detention center for at least a month. During this time, I hoped the police would discover something. However, the peaceful days did not last long, and the police's phone rang again. Brother Lin, Ms. Linda's case requires your cooperation in the investigation. The policeman on the other end of the phone was clearly embarrassed and seemed to know the complexity of the case. I calmly replied, "Okay, I'll be there right away." When I entered the police station, I saw my cousin wearing handcuffs, sitting in the interrogation room with a cold expression. "Brother Lin, the suspect said that he would only reveal more information after meeting you." The police pointed to the cousin who was sitting there. I nodded and followed the police inside. "Oh, is your brother here?" My cousin looked at me with a sneer and a sarcastic tone. Obviously, he had anticipated my arrival. "Yeah, brother, how did it become like this?" I responded to him in the same tone. My cousin was just a stranger to me who I grew up with. From the moment he pushed me down the stairs, I made up my mind not to be soft on him anymore. "Isn't this all thanks to you?" He raised the handcuffs on his hands and looked at me with a sneer. No, cousin, you think too highly of me." I responded calmly. In fact, I never intended to send him to the police station, but his series of actions made me realize that all this was inevitable. I asked the police, "You should have spent most of the 30 million, right?" My cousin suddenly stood up and pointed at me. "Yes, it's almost all spent." I did not deny that the 30 million had indeed been almost spent. Everything I said was to reassure him. "So you're just talking nicely, leaving all the money for mom and dad." My cousin's tone was sarcastic. He stood up and stared at me with an unwilling look on his face. Him calmly without denying anything, he said, "Haha, after all my scheming, you still managed to escape." My cousin sat back in his chair with a self-deprecating look. Him calmly, "Don't take advantage of me. After all, you're just an adopted child. You can't compare with me at all." My cousin smiled smugly, as if he expected that I would be sad, but his smile did not shake me. "Yes, I, the adopted child, am now enjoying the blessing of 30 million. I responded with a smile, my words full of disdain, completely unaffected by him. My cousin's face turned pale instantly. "Ha, do you know how Dad died?" My cousin suddenly asked coldly, as if he was ready to uncover a bigger secret. "Does my cousin know?" I asked him back. "I'm telling you in secret, it wasn't me who replaced Dad's medicine." My cousin suddenly laughed like a madman. "You didn't expect that, ha." I was stunned, my heartbeat quickened, and I immediately rushed forward to grab his shoulders, angrily asking, "Who changed it? Tell me, who changed it? Guess, huh?" My cousin smiled crazily, seeming to be enjoying this moment. I forced myself to calm down and looked at the policeman next to me. "Is it Mom?" I asked in a low voice. "No, of course not." My cousin shook his head. A strange smile appeared on his face. "You would never guess it." "Did Dad change it himself?" I asked tentatively again. My cousin didn't answer, but just laughed even more crazily. My cousin's eyes suddenly locked onto me sharply, and he said in a cold voice, "William, you are so smart." I felt a chill rising from the bottom of my heart. Although I had a premonition, my cousin's smile at this time was like the sharp claws of a ferocious beast, making me more alert. At the beginning, it was Dad who believed the rumor and thought that he could recover without taking high blood pressure medicine. His tone was full of malice. In order to keep you from knowing, he secretly replaced the medicine with vitamins. What did you find out? I continued to ask without letting my guard down. Of course, it was our dear mother who found out. A sneer appeared on the corner of my cousin's mouth. The morning after we found out, my mother and I told my father that I was not his biological child, and neither were you. Moreover, my mother didn't love him at all. Who would have thought that he would have a stroke immediately after hearing these words? Even if he had a stroke, Dad wouldn't die, right? I continued to probe, trying to find more clues from his words. Yes, there was a cold flash in my cousin's eyes, so I pushed him down the stairs while Mom was on the phone. After he said that, he showed a rampant smile, as if everything was under his control. "Are you the one who deliberately delayed the rescue time?" I asked in a deep voice. "Yes, it all should have ended, but it was you, it was you." My cousin's eyes were as sharp as a knife, pointing directly at me. At this moment, my whole body seemed to be covered with frost, and I felt an indescribable sense of oppression. My cousin's evil deeds were finally fully exposed at this moment. "You are the one who refuses to give up." He smiled coldly. "If you hadn't secretly called the police, who would have known the truth? Everyone would have thought it was just an ordinary accident. If you don't want others to know, then don't do it yourself." I responded calmly. Surprisingly, I was able to be so calm at this moment, as if I was no longer the angry and questioning me. Perhaps it was because the relationship between my parents had long been exhausted that I would not be shaken by these things. For me, being able to provide for my parents in their old age was the biggest concession I could make. "What about Mom?" I continued to ask. "Mom." The cousin smiled contemptuously. "Mom is just greedy. Since she is greedy, as her son, of course I have to satisfy her." His eyes became angry again. "But why didn't you tell my mother that she had diabetes?" "Why?" My cousin's voice began to become hysterical, as if he wanted to tear me apart. "You never cared about Mom. How come you didn't notice that she always had to take diabetes medicine before meals?" Him calmly, and the chill in my heart grew stronger. The madness in his eyes made me feel creepy. I once imagined the days when we were brothers and sisters, but now, this fantasy has long been shattered. I saw my mother fall in front of me and was so scared. My cousin hugged himself tightly with his hands, and his body trembled unconsciously. But when I thought about the 5 million, I didn't call an ambulance. He raised his head, his eyes full of pain and self-blame, tears quietly falling. I thought, as long as my parents are gone, as long as you're not their son, I can get the 5 million. Listening to his confession, I was shaken. Could it be that those words I made up unintentionally harmed my cousin and my parents? But in my previous life, my cousin also encouraged my parents to abandon me in the hospital. At least in this life, I have never had the intention to hurt them. So, I stayed with my mother all night until the next morning, when I told the waiter that I would clean the room at noon. My cousin loosened his arms, revealed a sinister smile, and continued, "This is the end." "What about my household registration? What's going on?" I continued to ask, wanting to know more of the truth. "In order to prevent you from taking the 1 million with me, I pretended to be you and went to the service hall." My cousin said casually, as if he was talking about a trivial matter. "You know what? You were too unguarded. The ID photo you sent me before came in handy." He pointed to his face and smiled proudly. I said my face was stung by a bee and it was swollen, so I gave them my ID photo. As a result, they believed it, haha. He clapped his hands triumphantly, his laughter full of provocation, reissuing the ID card, transferring the household registration. Everything went exceptionally smoothly. Even after I completed the formalities, the hotel didn't even call me. Ha ha ha. His laughter became more and more wild, as if he was laughing at the stupidity of me and everyone else. Watching him dancing with joy, I couldn't help but sigh deeply. He was so proud, as if he had everything under control, and I seemed so powerless in front of it all. "So, did you call me here to tell me the truth?" I finally calmed down and repeated the question. In my mind, the paternity test report from my previous life suddenly flashed, and my parents' wishes always lingered in my heart. That was the goal I had always wanted to achieve. He glanced at me with a look full of provocation. "Of course not. I asked you to come here to let you know that if it weren't for the lie you told, Mom and Dad would have been alive and well. At least I wouldn't do anything to hurt them." He spoke as if it was a matter of course, as if everything was to be blamed on me, and the burden of responsibility was suddenly thrown on me. But even if I lied, the money is still in my parents' hands, just like the initial 90,000. I know that if I continue to fall into the trap he set, I will only be led by him more. Stop putting your mistakes on me. I responded coldly. No, it's all your fault. If I didn't have that money from you, I would never hurt my parents for money. He pointed the finger at me again, as if expecting me to admit that I made a mistake. You are wrong. I looked him straight in the eye. It is your desire that harmed your parents. If it weren't for what happened in my previous life, perhaps I would have been deceived by his logic. But now, I no longer blame myself. Even if I have no money and my house is demolished, don't you want to get the compensation? I asked back, my tone calm but sharp. Everyone has desires. Who doesn't want to live a better life? This is human nature. I continued, my eyes never leaving her face. You can legally satisfy your desires through your own efforts, but you shouldn't do it this way. At this moment, I looked at him and suddenly felt that he was extremely pitiful. Until now, he still lived in a world he had woven, unable to escape the carefully woven web. At the very least, if you have no ill intentions, you should get the demolition compensation. I said calmly. I sighed deeply and looked at my cousin sitting on the stool. His expression was no longer so flamboyant, but full of endless pain. I turned and walked towards the door of the interrogation room, ready to leave. Just as the door was about to close, I heard my cousin crying softly. I stopped and wavered for a moment, but soon I realized that this was the arrangement he deserved. If this world is really a parallel world, then at least I can live in this world with a clear conscience. I once hoped to get along well with my cousin, take care of our parents together, and give them a peaceful old age. But if it weren't for these changes, perhaps we would be happier. Unfortunately, the reality is not like this. I still have to face the unchangeable fact that I am destined to be an orphan. Without the warmth of family, I always feel that something is missing,